A billionaire found a lost wallet on Christmas Eve, but what he returned was a family. The cold was a living thing. It coiled around Elara's ankles, slithered up her worn coat, and sank its teeth into her bones. Each gust of wind that howled down the empty city street felt personal, a deliberate shove toward despair. Snowflakes, once magical, were now just frozen tears from a merciless sky. They melted on her eyelashes, blurring the indifferent glow of the streetlights. In the back seat of her dying car, her daughter, Mia, was a small, huddled shape wrapped in their last clean blanket. Her soft, even breaths were the only sound that mattered in the world, the only rhythm keeping Elara's own frantic heart from shattering into a million pieces. For years old, Mia deserved a world of warmth and twinkling lights, of cookies and bedtime stories. Not this. Not a car that shuddered its last breath on a deserted road on Christmas Eve. Not a mother whose face was a mask of quiet terror. The gas gauge had been on empty for 10 miles. A lie she had whispered to herself, a prayer that fumes alone could carry them a little further. To a shelter, to anywhere that wasn't here. But the engine had sputtered, coughed, and fallen silent. A tomb of cold steel. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through the numbness. Elara fumbled for her purse on the passenger seat, her fingers stiff and clumsy. She needed her phone. She needed to call who? There was no one. Marcus had made sure of that. He had methodically, cruelly, severed every tie, isolating her until he was the only person in her world. And then he had cast her out. Her fingers scrabbled inside the worn leather of the purse. Nothing. Just a few loose crumbs from Mia's last cracker, a tube of chapped lip balm, and an empty, echoing space. Her wallet. It was gone. The breath left her body in a choked gasp. It felt as if the last pillar holding her upright had just crumbled to dust. Inside that small, frayed rectangle was everything she had left. $17, her driver's license, a worn photograph of her own mother, and the last shred of her identity. Gone. It must have fallen out at the gas station, hours ago, when she bought Mia a small carton of milk, her hands trembling as she counted out the coins. She had been so distracted, so consumed by the gnawing fear, she hadn't even noticed. A sob clawed its way up her throat, hot and raw. She clamped a hand over her mouth, muffling the sound. She couldn't wake Mia. She couldn't let her daughter see her break. She was the protector, the shield, the warm place. But the shield was cracking. Elara rested her forehead against the freezing glass of the driver's side window, the cold a brutal shock that did nothing to numb the agony in her chest. Everything gone. The apartment, the savings, her job, her friends. Marcus had taken it all with a smile that never reached his eyes. And now, the world had taken the last $17. This was it. The rock-bottom moment. She closed her eyes, and for a terrifying second, she allowed herself to drift. To just let the cold take her. To let the silence win. Then, a small sigh from the back seat. Mia. The thought of her daughter's face, of her trusting little hand in hers, was an anchor. It pulled her back from the edge. She couldn't give up. Not while that little heart was still beating, still dreaming of a Christmas morning that Elara had no way to provide. Through the snow-streaked windshield, she saw a flicker of light. It was faint, far down the long, tree-lined road. It looked like the entrance to a private estate, the kind of place she only saw in magazines. A long, winding driveway disappearing into darkness. But there was a light on, in a small building near the gate. A gatehouse, maybe, or a garage. Hope was a dangerous, fragile thing, but it was all she had. With movements that felt heavy and slow, as if moving through water, she unbuckled her seatbelt. She gently opened the car door, the hinges groaning in protest. The wind sliced at her face like a blade. She had to try. For Mia. She pulled the thin blanket tighter around her sleeping daughter before quietly closing the door. Each step was a battle against the wind and the crushing weight of her own failure. The snow crunched under her flimsy boots, the sound loud in the oppressive silence. As she got closer, she saw it was a large, modern garage, separate from the main house that was invisible somewhere in the darkness. The light spilled from a high window. The enormous bay door was slightly ajar, a sliver of warmth and life in the dead of night. She hesitated, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. What would she say? Who would be in there? Fear told her to turn back, to huddle in the car and wait for a morning that might never come. But the image of Mia's sleeping face pushed her forward. She peered through the gap in the door. The inside was immaculate, more like a showroom than a workshop. A stunning vintage car, a classic Mustang the color of midnight, was parked in the center. And beside it, a man was bent over the open hood. He was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in simple, grease-stained overalls. His back was to her. He moved with a quiet, focused confidence, his hands working on the engine with an unhurried grace. A mechanic, she thought, or a caretaker, working late on Christmas Eve. She took a shallow, shaky breath and knocked softly on the heavy steel door. The man didn't startle. He simply straightened up, slowly, and turned. His face stopped her breath. He was handsome, with kind eyes that seemed to hold a deep, quiet sadness. His expression was calm, patient. There was no annoyance at the interruption, only a gentle curiosity. He wiped his hands on a clean rag, his movements deliberate. "Can I help you?" His voice was deep and steady, a calm rumble in the quiet night. Elara's own voice was a thin, reedy thing, nearly stolen by the wind. My car. It broke down. Just up the road." She gestured vaguely into the darkness. "My daughter, she's in the car. It's so cold." The words tumbled out, desperate and clumsy. The man's gaze softened. He looked past her, toward the dark shape of her car, and then back at her face. He saw the chapped lips, the fear in her eyes, the way she shivered uncontrollably. He didn't ask questions. He didn't make her explain her poverty or her poor choices or the series of events that had led her to his door. He simply nodded. "Come inside," he said. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a gentle command, an offer of immediate sanctuary. He pulled the door wider, and the warmth from the garage washed over her, smelling of oil and metal and something clean. It was the most welcoming sensation she had felt in months. She stumbled inside, her body trembling now with relief as much as cold. "Wait here," he said, his voice still soft. He disappeared for a moment into a small office at the back of the garage. He returned with a thick, heavy wool coat. It was a man's coat, dark gray and impossibly warm. He held it out to her. "Put this on," he said. "Then we'll get your daughter." Elara stared at the coat, then at his face. It was the first act of unconditional kindness she had received in so long. It felt foreign, disorienting. She felt a prickling behind her eyes, the threat of tears. She swallowed them down. She slipped her arms into the coat. It enveloped her, heavy and protective. The lingering scent of him, something like cedar and clean laundry, was strangely comforting. He walked with her back to the car, his long strides easily keeping pace with her hurried, clumsy steps. He didn't speak, sensing she had no words left. When they reached the car, he opened the back door with infinite care. Mia was still asleep, her small face peaceful in the dim light. He looked at the sleeping child, and a flicker of something profound and sorrowful crossed his features before being replaced by a look of fierce gentleness. "Let's get her inside," he whispered. He scooped Mia up, blanket and all, into his strong arms as if she weighed nothing. Mia stirred, murmuring in her sleep, but she didn't wake. She instinctively snuggled closer to the stranger's warmth. Watching him hold her child with such tenderness, a wave of emotion so powerful it made her dizzy washed over Elara. Back in the garage, he led her to the small office. It was cozy, with a worn leather armchair and a small space heater humming in the corner. He gently laid Mia down in the armchair, tucking the blanket securely around her. "She'll be warm here," he said. He turned to Elara. "I'll call a tow truck for your car." I can't pay for it," she whispered, the admission tasting like ash in her mouth. "I lost my wallet." He simply looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Don't worry about that." He made a quick call, his voice low and authoritative. After he hung up, he turned his attention back to her. He saw how she stood rigidly, her arms wrapped around herself inside his oversized coat, looking like a frightened bird ready to bolt. "I'm Kael," he said, extending a hand. His skin was warm, his grip firm and reassuring. "Elara." Just then, something fell from the pocket of the coat he had given her. It was a small, worn leather wallet. Her wallet. It landed on the floor with a soft thud. They both stared at it. Kael bent down and picked it up. He must have scooped it up from the ground near her car without her even noticing. He had seen it, understood its importance, and retrieved it without a word. He held it out to her. Her hands trembled as she took it. She opened it. The $17 were still there. The photo of her mother. Her license. It was all there. But as she looked up at him, ready to thank him, she saw he had placed something else inside. Tucked into one of the slots was a crisp business card. The card was heavy, embossed with elegant, simple lettering. Kaelen Sterling, CEO, Sterling Industries. Beneath the name was the logo of one of the largest and most innovative tech companies in the world. This was no mechanic. This was the man who owned all of this. The house, the land, the company. A billionaire. The realization struck her with the force of a physical blow. She had stumbled into the world of a king, dressed in her rags, with nothing to her name but a broken-down car and a sleeping child. The tow truck arrived, its flashing lights painting the snow in strokes of red and blue. Kael handled everything with quiet efficiency, and soon her car was gone, hauled away into the night. "You can't stay here," Kael said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "The guest wing is prepared. You and your daughter will be safe there for the night." "I can't," Elara stammered, overwhelmed. "You've done too much already. We can go to a shelter in the morning." "It's Christmas Eve," he said, his voice soft but firm. "No child should be in a shelter on Christmas. Please, let me help." The word "please" disarmed her. It was a request, not a command. It gave her a choice she felt she didn't deserve. Looking at Mia, sleeping so soundly in the warm chair, she knew she couldn't refuse. For her daughter, she would accept this terrifying, incomprehensible act of kindness. She nodded, unable to speak. Kael led her out of the garage and toward the main house. The path was lit by soft, glowing lamps, and the house itself was a masterpiece of modern architecture, all glass and warm wood and stone, nestled perfectly into the snow-covered landscape. It was enormous, yet it didn't feel cold or imposing. It felt like a home. He carried Mia the entire way. Inside, the silence was vast. The air was warm and smelled faintly of pine needles and cinnamon. A magnificent Christmas tree stood in a two-story great room, its white lights reflecting off the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out onto the dark, snowy woods. It was the most beautiful place she had ever seen, and she had never felt more out of place. He led her down a long, quiet hallway to a pair of doors. "This is the guest wing. There are 2 bedrooms, a sitting area, and a bathroom. Please, make yourselves at home." He gently placed the still sleeping Mia onto one of the beds, a cloud of white, downy softness. He pulled the covers over her with a practiced, paternal gentleness that made Elara's heart ache. "There are clothes in the closet," he said, his voice a low murmur. "My late wife, she was about your size. I hope you don't mind. There are toiletries in the bathroom. If you need anything at all, just press the intercom button on the wall." He paused at the door, turning back to look at her. His eyes, for a moment, were filled with that same profound sadness she had seen earlier. A shared geography of loss. "My daughter's name is Lily," he said quietly. "She lost her mother 2 years ago. Christmas is difficult. Perhaps having another child in the house will be good for her." And then he was gone, leaving Elara standing in the middle of a room that was bigger than her entire last apartment. She felt a dizzying mix of gratitude and terror. This was a fairy tale, and she knew that fairy tales were just stories. Sooner or later, the clock would strike midnight. But for tonight, her daughter was warm. She was safe. Elara took a hot shower, the first in days, and let the steaming water wash away some of the grime and the fear. She found soft pajamas laid out on the bed and slipped into them. They felt impossibly luxurious against her skin. She curled up on the bed next to Mia, pulling her daughter close. She listened to the sound of her breathing, the steady rhythm a balm to her frayed nerves. For the first time in a very long time, Elara felt a flicker of something she had thought was lost forever. Safety. The next morning, Elara woke to the soft gray light of Christmas Day. For a moment, she was disoriented, the plush bedding and silent room a stark contrast to the harsh reality she was used to. Mia was still fast asleep beside her, a peaceful smile on her face. Quietly, Elara slipped out of bed. She found a simple sweater and pants in the closet that fit her well enough. She felt like an imposter, dressing in a ghost's clothes. She tiptoed out of the bedroom, drawn by the faint, delicious smell of coffee and bacon. She followed it to a vast, sun-drenched kitchen where Kael was standing at the stove. He was dressed in a simple black sweater and jeans, looking less like a billionaire CEO and more like just a father making breakfast. He turned as she entered, and a small, tired smile touched his lips. "Good morning. Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas," she whispered. "Thank you. For everything." "Coffee?" he asked, already pouring a cup for her. She accepted it, her hands wrapping around the warm mug as if it were a lifeline. Just then, a small girl with big, serious brown eyes and Kael's dark, curly hair appeared in the doorway. She was clutching a well-loved stuffed rabbit, her thumb tucked firmly in her mouth. She stared at Elara with an unnerving intensity, her gaze wary and guarded. "This was Lily." "Lilybug," Kael said softly. "This is Elara, and her daughter, Mia, is still sleeping. There are guests." Lily didn't say a word. She just watched Elara, her eyes taking in every detail. She was a gatekeeper, a tiny, solemn judge. Elara felt her own worth being weighed and measured in that silent, childish gaze. She offered a small, hesitant smile. "It's very nice to meet you, Lily." Lily's only response was to hide her face behind her father's leg. The day passed in a quiet, tentative truce. Mia woke up, and her initial shyness around the huge house and the new people was quickly overcome by the sight of the magnificent Christmas tree. Kael had a small pile of beautifully wrapped gifts waiting. He explained they were extras, things he'd bought for Lily that she didn't need. Elara knew he was lying, that he had likely had someone arrange it overnight, but she was too grateful to protest. Mia and Lily opened the presents in near silence, sitting on opposite sides of the tree, occasionally stealing glances at one another. Lily was a fortress. She spoke only to her father, and only in whispers. She watched Mia play with her new doll, her expression a mixture of curiosity and deep-seated caution. Elara didn't push. She understood the language of a wounded child. She gave Lily space, never trying to force an interaction, speaking to her only through gentle smiles and a quiet, calming presence. Later that afternoon, Elara was sitting in the great room, watching the snow fall outside, when she saw Lily struggling with a new toy. It was a small wooden birdhouse that needed to be assembled. The tiny screws and awkward angles were frustrating her. Her little face was scrunched up in concentration, her lower lip trembling slightly. Kael was on a phone call in his study, his voice a low, serious murmur from down the hall. Lily let out a small, frustrated sigh and threw the screwdriver onto the plush rug. She looked like she was about to cry. Quietly, Elara moved from the sofa to the floor, sitting a respectful distance away. She didn't say anything at first, just watched. "Sometimes," Elara said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, "the instructions are a little confusing." Lily looked up, startled. She clutched her stuffed rabbit tighter. "My mommy used to say," Elara continued, picking up one of the wooden pieces, "that the trick is to build the walls first. Like you're making a secret hiding place for the bird." She held the piece, not trying to take over, just showing it to her. She pointed to a small groove in the wood. "See? This part wants to connect with this part here." Lily watched her, her serious eyes moving from Elara's face to her hands. She didn't speak, but she didn't pull away. She nudged the piece she was holding a little closer to Elara. Together, in silence, they began to work. Elara let Lily do most of it, offering only quiet guidance, a steadying hand, a patient observation. She didn't rush her. She didn't praise her excessively. She simply shared the moment, a silent partner in the small, important task. When the last screw was tightened and the little birdhouse stood complete, Lily looked at it, then up at Elara. A tiny, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of her lips. It was the first crack in the fortress. That evening, after the girls were asleep in their separate rooms, Elara found she couldn't settle. The luxury around her still felt borrowed, temporary. She wandered back to the kitchen, needing a glass of water, needing to feel useful. She found Kael there, sitting at the large kitchen island, staring into a mug of what looked like tea. The house was silent around them. The weight of the unspoken things hung in the air. "I can't sleep either," he said, not looking up. She poured herself a glass of water and hesitated, unsure if she should stay or retreat. "Stay," he said, as if reading her mind. She sat down at the island, a safe distance away. The silence stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a shared, quiet space. "Thank you for what you did with Lily today," he said finally, his voice thick with emotion. She hasn't connected with anyone like that since her mother. "She's a wonderful girl," Elara said softly. "She just holds her heart carefully." Kael nodded, finally looking at her. The sadness in his eyes was raw, unguarded. "My wife, Sarah, she was the light. The laughter in this house. She built birdhouses with Lily in the garden. When she got sick, it all just stopped. The cancer took her so fast. I built this company, this empire, to give them everything. But I couldn't stop the one thing that mattered." His voice broke on the last words. He looked down at his hands, his powerful shoulders slumped. The benevolent protector, the billionaire CEO, was just a man who was drowning in his own grief. Seeing his vulnerability unlocked her own. The story of her own past, the one she kept locked away, rose to the surface. "His name was Marcus," she heard herself say, the name tasting like poison. "He was charming. Everyone loved him. He told me he'd take care of me and Mia. And he did. He took care of everything. He took my name off the bank account because it was easier for taxes. He convinced me to quit my job because he wanted to provide for his family. He slowly cut me off from my friends, my family, telling me they were a bad influence." She stared at her own hands, twisting in her lap. "I didn't see the cage he was building until the door was locked. The last few months, he wasn't charming anymore. He was cold, cruel. He told me I was worthless, that no one would ever want me, that I was lucky he put up with me. 2 days ago, he told me to get out. He had packed a single bag for me and Mia. He said the apartment was his, the car was his, the money was his. And he was right." A single tear traced a path down her cheek. She didn't bother to wipe it away. "I wasn't running to anything," she whispered. "I was just running away." Kael listened to every word, his gaze intense, his own pain momentarily forgotten. He was seeing her, truly seeing her, not as a charity case, but as a survivor. When she finished, he reached across the island and gently placed his hand over hers. His touch was not possessive or pitying. It was a simple, profound acknowledgement of her pain, a silent promise of solidarity. "You are not worthless, Elara," he said, his voice a low, fierce whisper. "You are the strongest person I have ever met." In that quiet, late-night confession, a bond was forged. Not of romance, not yet, but of something deeper. A kinship of shared wounds, of two broken souls recognizing the missing pieces in each other. They stayed like that for a long time, hands connected in the silent kitchen, while the snow fell softly outside, blanketing the world in a fragile, temporary peace. The next few days unfolded like a dream. Kael insisted they stay, telling Elara it was for Lily's sake, but she knew it was for all of them. A tentative routine began to form. Breakfast together in the sunlit kitchen. Long walks in the snowy woods, the four of them, with Mia's delighted shrieks and Lily's quiet observations filling the air. Lily, slowly, began to emerge from her shell. She started speaking directly to Elara, asking her questions. She showed Elara her favorite books. One afternoon, she shyly took Elara's hand as they walked. The small, trusting gesture felt monumental. Mia, adaptable and resilient, blossomed in the stability and warmth. She adored Kael, following him around like a small shadow, and she and Lily began to forge a sisterly bond, their whispers and giggles echoing in the once silent halls. Elara found her own footing. She started cooking, filling the house with the smells of baking bread and simmering soups. She organized the children's playroom. She wasn't a guest anymore. She was becoming a part of the house's rhythm, a part of its healing. She was reclaiming the parts of herself that Marcus had tried to erase. The nurturer, the creator, the source of warmth. Kael watched it all, a quiet sense of wonder growing inside him. He hadn't realized how gray his world had become until Elara and Mia filled it with color. He found himself rushing home from the office, eager for the comfortable chaos of family dinners. He saw the light returning to Lily's eyes. He saw the strength and grace in Elara, and his protective instinct was slowly, surely, transforming into something deeper, something that made his heart ache with a hope he hadn't felt in years. But the dream was fragile. The past was not a ghost. It was a predator, waiting. The blow came a week later. Elara was scrolling through a news site on a tablet Kael had given her when she saw the headline. Tech mogul Kaelen Sterling's new mystery woman, a homeless single mother. Her blood ran cold. The article was vicious. It was filled with quotes from an anonymous source who painted her as a manipulative grifter, a gold digger who had trapped the grieving billionaire. It mentioned Marcus by name, portraying him as the heartbroken victim she had abandoned. The words were his. She could hear his voice in every cruel, calculated phrase. He had found her. He had found them. Her first instinct was a primal, all-consuming terror. He was going to destroy this. He was going to ruin Kael's reputation, drag him through the mud, and expose the children to a world of ugly speculation. She had brought this darkness to their door. She had to leave. It was the only way to protect them. Her hands shaking, she ran to her room and began throwing her few belongings back into the bag she had arrived with. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. She had to get Mia and disappear before she caused any more damage. Kael found her there, her face pale, her eyes wide with panic. The tablet lay on the bed, the damning headline glowing like a poison. "Elara, what are you doing?" he asked, his voice tight with concern. "I have to go," she choked out, not looking at him. "He found me. I can't let him do this to you." To Lily. Do what? Let a coward hide behind anonymous sources to print lies? Kael's voice was calm, but there was a core of steel beneath it. He stepped forward and gently took her hands, stilling their frantic movements. "Elara, look at me." She forced herself to meet his gaze. His eyes were not filled with anger or regret. They were filled with a fierce, unwavering resolve. "You are not leaving," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a declaration. "This is your home now. You and Mia. You are family. And I protect my family. But your reputation, your company." "They can have my company," he said, his voice dropping to a raw, intense whisper. "They can have the money. They can have all of it. I will not lose this. I will not lose you." The raw sincerity of his words shattered her panic. He was choosing her. Publicly. Unconditionally. He was standing in front of her, a shield against the storm she had brought with her. The next day, Kael did something unprecedented. He called a press conference. Not at his office, but at his home. He stood before the cameras, not as a CEO, but as a man. Elara stood just inside the doorway, out of sight, her heart in her throat. "There have been reports in the media regarding my personal life," Kael began, his voice steady and clear, broadcast to millions. "They are filled with inaccuracies and malicious lies, sourced from a man whose cowardice is matched only by his cruelty. Let me be clear." He paused, and his gaze seemed to find every camera, every person watching. "Elara and her daughter came into my life by chance, during a time of great hardship for them. In the short time they have been in this home, they have brought more light and healing than I thought possible. They are not guests. They are my family." He took a breath, and his voice softened, but lost none of its power. "The source of these rumors, a man named Marcus Thorne, is the one who caused their hardship. My legal team now has evidence of his financial and emotional abuse. We will be pursuing this to the fullest extent of the law. Any publication that continues to print his lies will be met with the same legal force." He looked directly into the lead camera. "But this is not about lawsuits or public relations. This is about decency. It's about protecting the people you love. Elara is the kindest, strongest, most resilient woman I have ever known. She is a survivor, and she and her daughter have a permanent, cherished place in my home and in my heart. That is the only statement I will be making." With that, he turned and walked back into the house, leaving a stunned and silent press corps behind him. He found Elara leaning against the wall, tears streaming down her face. But they were not tears of fear. They were tears of overwhelming, cathartic relief. He had not just defended her. He had championed her. He had given her back her voice, her truth. He walked to her and gently wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. In that moment, the bond between them solidified into something unbreakable. The aftermath was swift. Kael's legal team, the best in the country, descended on Marcus. Faced with irrefutable evidence of fraud and a restraining order that barred him from coming anywhere near Elara or Mia, Marcus crumbled. His lies were exposed, his reputation ruined. He faded away, a pathetic bully defeated not by anger, but by truth and unwavering loyalty. The negative press vanished, replaced by stories of Kael's devotion and Elara's quiet strength. But they paid it no mind. Their world had shrunk to the four corners of their home, to the family they were building within its walls. The threat was gone. The past had been neutralized. Elara was finally, truly free. A few months later, on a bright spring afternoon, Kael found Elara in the garden. She was helping Mia and Lily plant a small patch of daisies. The girls' laughter was the sweetest music the old garden had heard in years. Elara looked up as he approached, her face glowing in the sunlight, a smudge of dirt on her cheek. She had never looked more beautiful. Kael's heart felt too big for his chest. He knew, with an absolute certainty that settled deep in his soul, that this was the rest of his life. He sat in the grass beside them, watching as Lily carefully showed Mia how to pat the soil around a new flower. "Mommy," Lily said, looking at Elara. The word was new, and it had come naturally one day, without fanfare, and settled into place as if it had always belonged there. "Can we build a birdhouse? For the daisies?" "I think that's a wonderful idea," Elara said, her eyes shining as she looked at Kael. Kael cleared his throat, his own heart fluttering like a nervous bird. "I have a question. For all of you." The three of them turned to look at him, their faces full of open curiosity. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, simple box. He didn't kneel. He just sat there, on the grass, a part of their circle. He opened the box. Inside was a simple, elegant ring with a single, perfect diamond. He looked at Elara, his heart in his eyes. "Elara," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "You came into my life like a blizzard and ended up being the sun. You and Mia, you didn't just fix what was broken in this house. You built something new, something better. I love you. I love the family we are." He turned his gaze to include the two little girls, who were watching, wide-eyed. "I want to make it official. I want us to be a family, forever. Elara, will you marry me?" Before Elara could even answer, a small voice piped up. "Are you going to be our dad forever, too?" Mia asked, her expression completely serious. Kael's composure broke. A laugh that was half a sob escaped him. "Yes, sweetie. If your mom says yes, I get to be your dad forever. And I get to be Mia's sister forever?" Lily added, a huge grin spreading across her face. "Forever and ever," Kael promised. Elara was crying, laughing, her heart overflowing. She looked at Kael, this kind, decent, wonderful man who had seen her at her absolute worst and had shown her what she was worth. She looked at the two beautiful girls, already sisters in their hearts. "Yes," she whispered, her voice full of all the love and gratitude she possessed. "Yes, of course yes." Lily and Mia cheered, throwing their arms around Kael and Elara, creating a tangle of happy, hugging bodies in the middle of the daisy patch. The wedding was not a grand affair for the society pages. It was held right there, in the garden, a few weeks later. The only guests were a few close friends and the elderly woman who had been Kael's housekeeper for 30 years. Elara wore a simple white dress. Kael wore a dark suit. Mia and Lily were the flower girls, scattering daisy petals down the grassy aisle. They said their vows as the sun set, promising not just to love and honor each other, but to protect and cherish the beautiful, blended family they had created. Lily stood beside Elara, and Mia stood beside Kael, and when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the four of them shared a group hug. Later that evening, long after the girls were asleep, Kael and Elara stood on the terrace, looking out at the moonlit garden. Elara leaned her head against his shoulder. "Do you remember that first night? In the garage. I remember thinking I had never seen eyes as sad or as strong as yours," he said, wrapping his arm around her. "I remember you gave me back my wallet," she said softly. She reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out the business card he had tucked inside it that night. She had kept it all this time. "Kaelen Sterling, CEO. You gave me this," she said, looking at the card. "But you gave me so much more." He took her hand, his fingers lacing with hers. "We gave each other more. We were two broken halves, and now we're whole," she finished for him. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars appear in the vast, dark sky. The house behind them was no longer silent or sad. It was filled with warmth, with laughter, with the gentle breathing of sleeping children. It was a sanctuary. It was a home. The broken pieces of their pasts had not been forgotten. They had been gathered, carefully, and used to build something new, something strong, something beautiful, something forever.